Excuse me. Okay, so today's lecture, I want to talk about excuse me, some of the major differences between Homo economicus, and that is this this archetype, this image that economists might have of a person who's very rational when they make their decisions and very self-interested when they make their decisions. So the term Homo economicus is, it's like using the taxonomy of biology to refer to like a new species of human that's makes all of their decisions according to economic theory. That's Homo economicus. Contrasting that with some other, let's talk about some other extreme. The other extreme we might call Homo socialis, which means social man. That is, humans that live in a society and they're very aware of the fact that whatever actions they may be taking affect everyone in their society. And that's one of their main concerns. One of their main concerns for Homo socialis is how does my action affect everyone in this society or whatever community they choose to think of. And then the question is, well, what are we? What are humans? We're Homo sapiens. That's the name of our species. Modern humans have been basically, anatomically, modern humans are 200,000 years old. That's a long time. And, you can't really say that we've evolved a lot and changed a lot. And like, certainly since civilization is only 10,000 years old, you can't really say that we've evolved in the last 10,000 years since civilization, at least not. That's just not how evolution works. Evolution doesn't work that quickly, I don't believe. But in this lecture, I would like to take some introspective look at what the nature of humans really are. The 200,000-year-old Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans. Are we Homo economicus? Are we Homo socialis? Or some combination of the two, which is kind of what I believe. Or you could say there are these subgroups, subtypes of humans where certain of us actually are just like Homo economicus and certain of us are just like Homo socialis and everyone else is somewhere in between. And let's just look at some of the major results of behavioral economics that have something to say about this. Okay. Oh, I want to read something Peter said in the chat. Do you mind, Peter? I'm going to read your comment. He says there's a new artery, like a blood vessel artery, in our arm that is showing up very recently. We are still evolving. Okay, I will grant we are still evolving. But my point is evolution is slow. And I don't mean to say that society, I hope I don't sound really confusing, like I'm just spouting theories from all over the place. I do have a point where I want to go with this, but I think there's I acknowledge that culture matters a lot. We may have been anatomically the same now as we were 200,000 years ago, but culturally we are completely different. Culture is really evolving. So if you're a behavioral economist and your question is, how do people actually make decisions? What goes into their brains when they're making these decisions and causes them to behave in a certain way? You'd be a fool to ignore culture, because we grow up in some sort of civilization, some sort of culture that really affects how we behave. It's enormous how much without even realizing it. We do something because that's how it's always been done. That's how we've learned how to behave. So I'm definitely, I'm not, I definitely want that to exist as well. Let's talk about the culture, and let's talk also about just the nature of humans in decision making. So let me now go to share a screen. Not this one, but I'll go to it and then switch. Oops, actually not that one either. Where did it go? Okay, so I posted a 7th set of lecture notes on Blackboard. It's called Pro-Social Behavior. Let's look at that. This term that I've said, Homo socialis, is actually not that common. I've seen it some places, but a more common terminology is pro-social, and that means a type of behavior that is good for society. It means you care about other people, care what the effect of your actions are on others. That makes you pro-social, as opposed to self-interested. Here we go. So here is that's an odd sound. Here is a set of lecture notes on pro-social behavior. Let's talk about it. But if at any point you guys want to stop and have a discussion, I'm game. I'd love to. That's something we can't do with you watching videos. On Wednesday, you're going to watch a set of 4 videos at least. And you can't discuss with me, at least during the videos, but now you can. So please jump in anytime. Here's what I have to say. The first thing to recognize is that self-interest was not assumed by classical economists. I think I started off telling you this along like one of the first few classes. There is an important piece of economic literature called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, written by Adam Smith, perhaps the most famous economist of all time. Adam Smith wrote this, that when people make decisions, they don't just care about directly what benefits themselves. There's something of moral. Moral sentiment means, in my mind, I'm trying to think about what's the right thing to do, and I might do that. If what I'm doing is affecting others in a very negative way, out of morality, I think I should not do that thing. So this is very old. This is in the 1700s. Even at that time, economists were thinking about not just what a self-interested person would do, but somebody who was conscious of these moral sentiments might do. And I'm not going to go have you read that paper. It's a very thick, long. It's not necessarily a short read. It's a good read, but it's long. I won't have you read that. Moving forward, when I talk about neoclassical, neo means new, after the classical economists, because they had to make everything axiomatic. And that means you start with these building block assumptions that are very mathematical, and you derive a theorem, you derive the predictions based on those simple assumptions. And they had to start with pretty simple assumptions, and one was self-interest. Self-interest became one of the most hardwired assumptions in economics because of almost mathematical necessity. And that's starting in the year 1900, neoclassical economists used self-interest, which is not the same as being pro-social. There's a clear difference there between somebody who's pro-social and somebody who's self-interested. And that's what the next bullet point says. And this is me talking here in the last bullet point, that Homo sapiens, that's us, we actually include some of both types, which is to say that we're not some mixture. It's not like we're it's not like we're both at the same time. It's that the species includes both types. I think that's actually a better model. Rather than saying that every single individual human is at the same time Homo economicus and Homo socialis, I wouldn't say that. I would say some humans are pretty close to Homo economicus, and other humans are pretty close to Homo socialis. That's a better model than saying everybody is somewhere in between. Okay. Do you guys have any? What do you guys think about that? Do you agree? Just I haven't told you any of the specific studies that we're going to look at, but you know, they're I really hate to use the word jerks because, but I'm wondering if you agree with this idea that like just some people are just jerks. Some people, it doesn't matter how their actions affect others. They're going to do
Can I
whatever
do
they
the
want to do, and they
watermelon juicy J? And
wait. Are
we
you
need those
talking to me?
tips too. I need the ones I can roll myself. We do these perforated. Do you have the regular ones? Regular piece? Yeah.
This
That's
guy
fine. I'll do
is
these.
talking and doesn't realize he is unmuted. Who is it? I can't tell who that is. Somebody's not paying attention and they are talking. I don't know who it is. Okay, they stopped. Anyways, it doesn't seem like anyone has any comments about this. I will just go on. That, in my opinion, Homo sapiens includes some of both types. Okay. Here are some examples of the contrast between self-interest on one end and a genuine concern for others on the other end. It's one of the oldest human philosophical ideas, like thousands of years old. People had this idea that you shouldn't just care about yourself. Don't always do the thing that makes you better off. The golden rule is this old thing that says, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. It appears in ancient civilizations all across the world: Egypt, Middle East, India, China, Greece. Even in many religious texts, not just one text, but different religions have this idea that this is the way you should behave. Don't just look out for your personal interests. That's self-interest, but also for the interests of others. That means pro-social. This appears in the Bible, the King James version of the Bible, Philippians. I think this is a letter of St. Paul to the Philippians. I'm not a scholar of the Bible or anything, but I do think this book of the Bible is just a collection of letters that St. Paul was writing to these early Christians in some other city, and he's trying to describe to them what it means to be a Christian, and he's basically talking about what we're talking about, which is don't just be self-interested. You should have some concern for others, and that's 2,000 years old. Okay. What are some ways in which we are not self-interested? We've already talked about some. Anybody have any obvious ways in which we're not self-interested they want to mention?
Maybe like gift giving?
Great. We give gifts. Why do we do that? Who said that? Is that Emily?
It was Sierra.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see you. There you are. Now, yeah, I have to open the box and see which box is talking, and I see now it's Sierra. Thanks, Sierra. So we give gifts when we don't need to. Well, okay. So this is great. Gift giving, it could be self-interested, couldn't it? What if you gave a gift to somebody hoping that it's going to benefit you in the long run? You could imagine that, right? Let's say let's say you give your boss a gift for some reason. It's your boss's birthday and you give him like a really nice bottle of wine. I don't know. I always come back to wine. What do people give for gifts? I don't even know. But what if you're doing that in the hopes of getting a promotion later? I would say that actually is purely self-interested. It could be purely self-interested. But I still think Sierra's point is a good one, which is sometimes people give gifts for no reason, not because they have to, not because it'll benefit themselves later. Sometimes people just genuinely, out of a concern for others and in order to make people better off, they give gifts. And sometimes what we're going to talk about in this class is they give gifts to each other. There's a gift exchange, which it may literally make both people better off, even in the case where nobody has to give the gift. It's not like I have to give you a gift and you have to give it back to me. It'd be better for each of us to just not give the gift and receive the other person's gift. But I will show you some cases where that does not happen. In fact, I myself have done research into this topic. I've published 2 papers about gift exchange. So I feel qualified to tell you a little bit about how gift exchange happens, where two people who they're not going to play together later, right? So imagine you and your boss. You give your boss a gift, hoping it's going to help you out later, because you're going to have these future interactions. What we do in my experiment is we make sure these 2 people aren't going to see each other again. You're going to have this interaction once and then never again. And we test whether or not they're willing to engage in gift exchange that could be mutually beneficial for the people. And a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the times, it works. People do it. So that's a good example, Sierra. We give gifts when we don't have to. And because we feel like it's the right thing to do, maybe. We feel good about improving somebody else's life in that particular way. Especially if you have like a really good gift that they can use, something that benefits them a lot more than it costs you to give it. I think that's the most interesting case, because that is the case where it's beneficial for society. Okay, Ibrahim, good point. He says he thinks there's an element of self-interest in most cases of giving. Okay, so this is a bit of a cynical view, because he actually says in most cases, he doesn't say all cases, most cases of giving, there's an element of self-interest. That could very well be true. But even in his comment, that means there's some cases, not all, but some where there isn't an element of self-interest. And surely that's one way in which humans are not self-interested. So good answer to this question. Anybody else have any others? I'm gonna start.
I
Sure.
just got back home, so I can talk now that I'm. How do you avoid the subjects in your experiments from thinking about like judgment by the experimenter? How do you get rid of the?
Good.
That seems like the hardest thing to control for.
Very good. This was a critique given just very soon after experimental economics existed. There was this critique, and it's got several names. One name is experimenter demand effects, and that is people behaving in an experiment are conscious of the ways that the experimenter, the person who's doing the research, is watching them, and maybe they may have an incentive to behave in a way that is expected. That's one thing. And the other one is, of course, scrutiny. The more scrutiny they feel, the more compelled they feel to behave in a certain way. And all I can say is what all experimental economists say when asked this question is that we try to minimize these effects. They do not disappear. There will always be some experimenter demand effect unless you really get a situation where people don't realize they're in an experiment, or they know that whatever they do will never be seen by anyone. And there are some rare experiments that achieve that. Most of the time, it is not achieved. And my answer to your question is, we try to minimize those effects, but they do not disappear. They do not.
Alrighty.
So I don't have a good answer. You may, if you ever become an economist, you may be one of those economists who thinks experimental economics is not really legitimate. And there's a number of reasons why you could think that, and that's one of the reasons. But it still exists as a field because it's a way to collect data, it's a way to test predictions and learn about how humans behave. despite the fact that it has those limitations. And so in my experiment, you may be exactly right. There may be some people who said, I want the experimenter to see that I'm doing the right thing, so I'm going to give a large gift. In some case, I don't really care. I don't really care why they're doing it. I care that they're doing it. I care that these two people who don't even know each other, it's anonymous, they're giving each other gifts, and it's making both people better off, because in my experiment, the two that I'm thinking of that I did, I always made it more beneficial to the person who receives the gift than it is costly to the person who gives the gift. So it's not like I'm just handing you $1, here's a $20 bill, you got 20, but I lost 20. It's more like I'm paying $5 for a gift that benefits you $20. I don't even know how that's possible in real life, but let's just assume that there is some way that I could benefit you in a way that's disproportionately good for you than it is bad for me. And certainly, I think we can all agree, we want people to do stuff like that. If you have something you could do that just costs you a little bit, but it benefits other people a lot, then we, like the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. I think we can all agree that it's actually efficient. It's efficient for people to do stuff like that for each other, and our society will benefit from it. That's an interesting one, Peter. Paying somebody's meter before the parking person gets to it. Ooh, this is a great potential segue into something that I'm not ready to talk about yet, and that is punishment. Oh, I love punishment. Punishment is a really interesting concept because, like, what would the Bible tell you about punishment, right? Is it pro-social to punish, or is it pro-social to prevent somebody from being punished? Think about what Peter just said in the chat. If you can see the chat, check out the chat. If not, I'll just tell you. He said to pay someone's parking meter before the person gets a fine. Well, what you're doing there is essentially you're essentially stopping the punishment mechanism from happening, which is that if you leave your car parked somewhere longer than you're supposed to, you are supposed to get a fine, which disincentivizes you from leaving it there too long in the first place. And if you pay somebody else's parking meter, you're thwarting this mechanism. Is that a pro-social thing to do or not? It's really complicated. But economists like me and others that are even much better and more in tune to this question than me have designed experiments and run experiments that test how people behave when there's a role for punishment, where we could punish you if you don't do what you're supposed to do. And in fact, sometimes you could punish the people who are doing the punishing, or you could punish people for not punishing. And it goes forever like that. And to try to summarize the answers is like, wow, it's complicated. Whether or not we think of as punishment as being a pro-social act or the opposite of a pro-social act. If it's just, if you're doing it out of anger and it doesn't really help anybody, then why are you doing it? It's not pro-social in that case. Oh, Emily said something about organ donors as an example of concern for others. I would say absolutely. This is almost like a form of altruism, although if you unfortunately, if you pass away and you're no longer alive, you could argue you don't really need these organs anymore, and to donate them is something you can do, which is very low cost, but it helps. Oh, was that your answer to something which is very low cost for you, but high benefit to others? If so, that's a great answer, Emily. Because I remember asking that earlier, and I don't think I saw your chat until recently, but that's a great example of something where it's a pretty low cost for you to donate your organ, but it could be a huge benefit to others. if they're waiting for one. If they need a liver to survive, and they're just waiting to see if the one comes up. Okay, good examples, guys. I love punishment. I didn't really, did I say that? I said that. Okay, here are some that I will talk about as just a way to guide the class, is things that we could talk about. We have already talked about cooperation. The fact that humans tend to cooperate. Remember golden balls half the time. Half the time in golden balls, people chose to cooperate, to try to split their earnings instead of trying to steal the earnings. That's a way in which humans are not self-interested. If they were purely self-interested, they would try to steal the money every time. There's no reason not to. It always helps you, or either doesn't matter or it helps you. But the fact that 50% of the time people choose to split, that means something. And oftentimes it's very large stakes when they do that. We're going to talk about trust, reciprocity, and trustworthiness. These three are huge ones for this class, and I'm going to have you watch videos about those. You will see videos about all of those things. What do I mean by that? I mean, you may trust someone not to exploit you or to be opportunistic and take advantage of you. And I'm wondering if that is obvious, if that makes sense. Do you trust people? I use this example a lot with. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna bring up this example early. The question is, if you were at the library, pretend there is no pandemic, and you're just sitting at the library doing some studying, and your computer is there and your books and everything is just sitting at the table. The question is, would you trust the person? Let's say there's a stranger sitting, at the table across from you, or at the same table, just, a little bit to the side, and you say, I have to go to the bathroom. Will you watch my stuff for me while I'm gone? And I ask my students this a lot. Would you trust that person to watch your stuff? As opposed to just grabbing your stuff and leaving, either they could leave and leaving your stuff exposed, or maybe they could be the ones who take your stuff. So I'm actually curious, would you guys trust somebody to do that? Answer in the chat. Yes or no? Yes, you would trust somebody to watch your stuff, or no, you would not trust somebody. A stranger, this is a stranger, but it's another student. You're a VCU student, sitting next to you is another VCU student. You never met before, and you say, hey, can you watch my stuff? I gotta go to the bathroom. And you leave something like valuable, like your computer. Would you leave your computer there with a stranger? For the most part, no. Wow, a lot of people say yes. No, so Jade, the only thing you know about them is that they're a VCU student. I mean, you can look at them and they look like a VCU student, but that's it. And maybe you're not even sure they're the VCU, but you're both studying in the library at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and you're like, you just have to go to the bathroom. You don't want to give up. You don't want to pack up all your stuff. You're saying, I'll be right back. Can you watch my stuff for me? I ask my students this, and you know what? It's always like you answered here. Some people say yes, and some people say no. There's like the split. You know what's also interesting is that the people who say yes, they just don't understand. I should say it the other way. The people who say no, they don't get it. They don't get why anyone would ever say yes. they in their minds, it seems crazy to trust a stranger with something valuable like your computer, because they're just worried. They're like, what if that person isn't trustworthy, and they walk away with your stuff? And the people who are trustworthy say, I don't think that's going to happen. I really think that guy's not going to steal it. And if they did, I mean, probably you could track them down. There'd be cameras or something. They always find some way to sort of justify it and say, I'm not worried about that happening. I feel like the people who are the most trustworthy are people who have some kind of confidence in the system will fix it. Most people are honest people. I don't think it's going to happen, and therefore I'm just not worried about it. Whereas the people who say no are like, are you crazy? You could lose your computer. It's not worth it. Okay, so this idea of trust and trustworthiness, it's not just about going to the bathroom and the library. It matters for business. It matters for when you make decisions, um, like a firm that makes a decision. How much can I trust somebody that I write a contract with you? It's literally impossible to put everything in the contract that could happen. There's so much uncertainty in the world. You can't write a contract that says if this happens, we'll do this. If this happens, we'll do this. This happens. So because contracts are incomplete, there's a big element of trust that goes into doing business, any type of business with someone. And I have a very good example that I always come back to, which is house cleaning services. If you guys probably don't use this, but we don't now, but we briefly used a house cleaning service. People who you give them the keys to your home, and sometime when you're not there, they enter your house and clean your stuff and then leave. You have to trust these people not to, break something or steal something, or, I don't know. There's a lot. It's impossible for you to check every possible thing that you can check to see was this stolen, was this stolen, was this stolen. If you had to spend hours checking to see if everything that could have possibly been stolen wasn't stolen, then the time you would waste doing that would make it not worth it for you to hire the cleaning service in the first place. So this is an example of something where trust actually is critically important for an economy to work. For us to do business with each other, we have to trust each other. Every time you order food from a restaurant, you're trusting that restaurant not to, cut every corner they can to make the food you're eating unsafe. Moldy bread and spoiled meats and cheeses, and there's stuff they could do that would maybe, just really filthy conditions in the back of the kitchen that they don't bother to clean. Maybe that would be a way to save them some money, but I guess we have the government that is supposed to punish people. Yeah, thanks, Ibrahim, that's good. There are mechanisms to punish people who break the trust, but even those aren't perfect. We don't have health safety inspectors that come every day to a restaurant to check to see that, make sure the food is safe. I think if you think about it, there is a big element of trust that you have in a business when you buy something from them, especially if it's food that you're going to eat. And I think it's something that we'll talk about. And there's videos I have a video that you can watch about that. Same thing with reciprocity. That's a good example because you don't have, if somebody does something nice for you, you could be like, thanks, sucker, now I have the thing. Or you could reciprocate. Yeah, we trust them in the aggregate. You're making sort of a laissez-faire argument that the free market would punish people if they were breaking the rules, if it were maybe it's an inspector, but you trust the aggregate. I think that's true. I think with coronavirus, actually, there are certain businesses you're more likely to trust than others. I know that's true for me and my family. I ordered some food from a restaurant, and it was a carryout. So I walked in, I got the food and paid for it, and I was wearing a mask, and the person who gave me the food was wearing a mask. But in the back of the restaurant, I could see nobody was wearing a mask. Like not the person interacting with me, but the people in the back that were making the food. None of them were. And I came home. I gave my family the food. I told my wife this story, and she decided we were never going back there again. And we haven't. So, right. There is something about we're paying attention. We as consumers, we want to do business with trustworthy businesses, and we definitely pay attention to it. And it's important for an economy. That's all I'll really say is that you want to study behavioral economics, trust and trustworthiness are big parts of it, of what makes something work well. Okay, here, let's just talk quickly some other ones. Fairness. Actually, that's a huge one. Fairness. The fact that people want something to be fair. When they're bargaining, they don't just, right now I'm talking about the ways that are different between how people might be self-interested versus having some concern for others. It could be that we don't think it's right to exploit people in a market. Like, oh, I can take all of the money, leave you with nothing. Well, some people say that's unfair. The more fair thing to do would be to share the profits of what we're doing a little more equitably, or to, just make sure everybody receives some benefits rather than one person getting all the benefit. And there are a lot of economic studies that just question what is it that people really care about when it comes to fairness. Why does it appear that they care a lot about fairness in certain situations and not at all about fairness in other situations? We'll have to talk about that. And in fact, you'll watch a video about that. Watch a video about that Wednesday. I'm not going to waste time talking now about something that you'll learn when you watch the video. But I think that's really important. And it's actually a huge contribution of behavioral economics. Remember what behavioral economics is. It's something which improves economic theory. You take the economic theory, you say, wait a second, here's how people actually behave, and what they really care about is this. You combine that to improve the theory. And so if you say, I'm gonna bargain. There's two people, they're bargaining with each other. You take that theory that says, here's what'll happen if people are just purely self-interested. You get this prediction, you get this outcome. If you change it to say, people, of course they care about themselves. Everybody cares about themselves, but they may also care about fairness. There's something sort of naturally human that says a more fair outcome is better. And therefore, when they're negotiating with each other, they have this fairness concept in their mind, and it leads them to a very different prediction. I will show you a game called the ultimatum game, where the difference is you couldn't have a bigger difference in the world. There's like the prediction of standard economics is that one party gets all of the benefit, the other person gets none. That's the standard economic prediction. And the reality is it's very close to half and half. It's not quite half and half, but the person with the power gets maybe 60% of the benefit, and the person without it gets maybe 40%. But that's so different than 100% to one party and 0 to the other. Why does that happen? It's because people care about fairness. Both the person who's making the offer and the person who has to judge the offer and decide whether they want to accept it. That's part of what behavioral economics does. Change the model so you get better predictions. Okay. Honesty, that's a real easy one to think about, right? Oh, honesty. It could be that self-interested person will just always lie, always cheat, whenever possible. As long as it's not illegal in the sense that they would be punished for it. There are a lot of times where it's perfectly legal to lie. And there's even some cases where it's legal to cheat. It depends on the context, but sure, there could be cases where that's illegal, especially if no one's going to stop you. I'm holding my tongue right now to not talk about politics. Keep it in economics. Let's not talk about politics. Okay, and then the last bullet point there that I have is altruism. Is time right? I don't think my time is right. Altruism is, what does that mean? It means when somebody does something that hurts themselves, a little cost to themselves, in a purely generous, I want to help you manner. You know, I suffer some cost willingly, knowing that it's going to help you. It's not quite the same as any of the things above it. That's why it gets its own dot. But those 5 dots are going to be 5 ways that behavioral economics shows how people are different than this model of self-interest. The model of self-interest is just a bit inadequate in describing how people behave in those 5 sorts of situations. Okay. Any questions? Any discussions? Here's my next slide. Why is this part of behavioral economics? Kind of sounds like psychology or sociology or political science. Why do economists care about it? And the answer is there's some economic decision making that's affected by this stuff. Think about how, here's some examples. Think about how allocation of scarce resources happens. There's only so much of this blank to go around, and we have to decide how to allocate it. Well, that's where fairness comes into play. When you're talking about aggregating behavior into markets, you know, if one person does one thing, maybe it doesn't matter for a market, but if everybody in a market is behaving in a certain way, that could be enough to sort of sway what happens in a market. Let's take a labor market, right? If there's enough people who think a wage is too low because it's unfair, and they actually reject it, they say, fine, I'm not going to work at all. You can imagine a labor union that sort of organizes its concern for fairness and its bargaining power in a certain way. How about public goods? Public goods are things that help everybody. That the benefits occur to many people, and they can't be privatized. It can't be you can't say charge people for the public good because everyone benefits from it. Well, that matters how much you care about others. If the simplest example I use is a street light. If everyone in this country said, well, if you want a street light, build it yourself. You know, your street is pitch dark. You can't see your way to the street to get your garbage can on garbage night. You think it's too dark? Build your own street light. People wouldn't build streetlights. It's too costly. It's not worth it for them. But a government that represents people's interests, that says, actually, we do care about everybody's, that could be, that's not the best example because governments actually don't need, they don't need permission. They can just build it. So it's not like, anyways, I don't want you to memorize these ways, why the reasons economists would care about this stuff. There's just some things that I thought of. The second bullet point is one I already made about let's improve the predictions, and the third one. The third bullet point will be let's use experimental economics. Experimental economics is a great way, in my opinion, to sort of formalize why people behave this certain way. We can use experimentation allows you to have a control group and a treatment group and say that's the only thing that's different. The only thing that's different between the control group and the treatment group is this one thing that I've changed. And therefore, you know, Peter made this argument, well, how do you know that people are only just behaving that way because they think about what the experimenter is thinking about them? Well, that should be the same in both treatments. You wouldn't say, you know, in the control treatment, people really care about scrutiny, but in the treatment, they don't care about scrutiny. They probably care the same in both treatments, and therefore any difference that you do observe, ceteris paribus, this is the Latin phrase, which means all else being the same, just one change, ceteris paribus, allows us to examine exactly why people behave this way, why it happens. Okay? More. The first one I'm going to give you is the easiest one to talk about. And let's talk about this concern for honesty. And it's a game called the deception game. I might actually want you guys to play it. Is somebody willing to play the deception game? Just 2 people. And we'll play it over chat. 2 people, the first 2 people to say they want to play, will get to play. Ibrahim's playing. Am I saying your name right? Ibrahim and Jade. Okay, Ibrahim and Jade are playing the deception game. Here's how the deception game works. I will say Ibrahim is the first player, and Jade is the second player, because that's the order in which they agreed to play. And I'm not going to give you money, I'm sorry. But let's pretend you could win $10, $20, something along these lines, maybe $11. Let's say 20. Let's say either 10 or 20. Make it simple. You could win either $10, $20 in this game. So let's pretend you like really care because you want the $20. You want money. And I'm going to text something just to Ibrahim, and the rest of you won't know what I'm texting to him. I will tell you out loud that Jade will choose either option A or B. And A and B will determine who gets paid what, but I'm not going to say to Jade exactly how she'll get paid. Just know that there's up to $20, it could be one, and A and B both, it could have some effect on how you're paid. Okay. Ibrahim, I'm texting you a bit of private information, which means information that only you have. And I'm pretending that these are dollars. They're not really dollars. And you are going to say something to Jade, and then she will pick either A or B, and then the payoffs will happen. Okay, Ibrahim, did you get the message I sent you? So here's the deception game. Okay, so Ibrahim, you have to tell Jade one of 2 things. You have to either say, you'll make more money if you choose A, or you'll make more money if you choose B. And you can type it to her, or type it to all of us. Type it to all of us. We all want to see. So Ibrahim, tell Jade either you'll make more with A, or you'll make more with B. And then she'll choose A or B, and then the payoffs will happen. Do you know how to change it to everyone? I'm sure you do. Jade, you'll get more money if you choose A. Now, Jade, you have to choose either option A or option B. You're going to go with A? A lol. Okay, so Jade chose A. That means she earns $10. Congrats. And Ibrahim, he earns $20. So, well, no, but I haven't told you what you would have got with option B. But the answer is you would have gotten $20 with option B. You would have gotten $20 with option B, Jade. And Ibrahim only would have gotten 10. Okay, so let's pretend this was a real case. This was real. What happened? Double or nothing. Oh no! Now the trust is gone. So what happened? Ibrahim had to decide: do I tell the truth, which is Jade will make more money with option B, knowing that if she believes me and then acts upon that belief, she'll choose B, and I will only get $10, whereas I could get 20 this other way. So does everyone see how this is sort of like, is it worth it to try to deceive Jade?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Would like if I chose B and he also chose B, would we both get $20?
He doesn't make a choice. You
Oh,
determine the
dang.
payoffs. You determine the payoffs for both people. And it was here, let me type to everybody. Option A equals Ibrahim $20 and Jade $10, just to be clear. Okay, that was option A, which is the one you chose. Option B equals Ibrahim $10 and Jade $20. So it's important here. Ibrahim does not get to choose option A or B. He doesn't control A or B. The only thing he can do is send a message to Jade that says, and in fact, he's not allowed to tell her these numbers either in this game. I'm telling you about this game because this game was really played with real people, and I'm going to tell you the results soon. But in this game, he only thing he's allowed to say is, "You'll make more money with A." Jade, you'll make more money with A, or Jade, you'll make more money with B. And one of those is true, one of those is not true. And the question is, how willing are people to engage in this sort of deception? This was done by an economist named Yuri Gneezy, who's kind of antagonistic, has a bit kind of an antagonistic relationship with me a little bit because various reasons. I still like him as a person, but he basically didn't want me to get tenure once. Anyways, I will say he's a much better economist than me, and so he wrote me a letter of rec that was not very flattering. Not a letter of recommendation, but anyways, when I was going up for tenure the first time, I got a letter from Yuri Gneezy, and his oh, sorry, I'm saying too much. He is the person who did this experiment, and he changed the dollar amounts. Another thing he did was, no, he had different treatments. That's what I mean. All experimental economists do this. Here's one treatment, here's another treatment, here's another treatment, and you kind of see how people's behavior changes across treatments. What he also did was, he did some treatments where Ibrahim could just decide. He didn't have to deceive, right? It could be that, okay, because here's another one that's perhaps more interesting. What if these were the options? Option A equals Ibrahim $11, and Jade 10. I'm gonna ask you what you would do in this case, Ibrahim. Okay, so pay attention here. Versus Ibrahim $10 and Jade 20. Ooh, check that out. Check that out. Ibrahim, you have to pretend these were the numbers I gave you, and the same thing is true. You have to tell Jade either you'll make more money with option A or you'll make more money with option B. What would you tell her in this case? In that case, you would tell the truth. Now, it's not worth the lie. Okay, so good point here. You talked about your reputation. When Gneezy did this experiment, he made sure that this was done anonymously. So you were sending a real message to a real person, but that person is never going to find out who you, Ibrahim, actually are. They will know that somebody lied to them, but they won't know that it was you, and therefore your reputation will be safe. Okay? If that's the case, I'll deceive. Even though it only gives you $1 extra. It gives you $1 extra to lie to her and say, you'll make more money with option A, but you would go ahead and do it? Ibrahim? What's the principle? No, so of positive return. Let's call it self-interest. That's what we're studying right now. We're talking about this. Self-interest versus pro-social. Okay, let's call it that. There's a certain behavior that's self-interested, and that is, I will always lie to Jade. Even if it means I only get $1 extra, I'll take the $1 extra. versus a pro-social attitude that says, well, in this case, if I lie to her, I'm only benefiting myself one, but she could benefit with an extra $10. It would be much better for the both of us if she chooses option B. Also, I think lying is wrong. That could be something that you have in your pro-social attitudes. That society is always better off if people tell the truth. You could think that. Immanuel Kant thought that. He had sort of an extreme position against lying, whereas other philosophers have had a much more relaxed. You should lie if it helps people. White lies are good. Like if your wife says, "Does this dress make me look fat?" You don't think about it and like analyze her shape and then answer. You just say no. Always say no. No one is losing anything. It's only a game. What do you mean? Ooh, I think I know what you mean. This is very convenient. You've chosen your reference point to be $10, right? This is prospect theory now. You've chosen a reference point which came from you. I never said like consider a game where everyone's going to get at least $10 and $10 is the reference point. And then you could either win $1 or she could gain $10. What if $20 was the reference point? Then it would be losing. And regardless, I'm guilty of the same thing. I think of these in terms of gains and losses. And I do agree with you that it does psychologically, it does matter whether you think the person's losing money. And you can easily justify that, well, if she's not losing anything, she still gets $10. I'll take the 11. She can have 10. And she should be happy with her 10, something like that. You can always justify that. What I'm mostly concerned, though, is whether people have a concern for honesty. They actually prefer to behave in an honest way, in a way that the model of self-interest would not predict. So my question, how much time do I have? Am I running out of time? Oh gosh, I have 6 minutes left. Is my watch just wrong? My question to you guys is, what do you think the percent of people that would lie in both of these cases are? What's your guess? So in the first case, remember, it was Ibrahim could get $20, so it would benefit him 10 to lie. And in the second case, it would only benefit him $1 to lie. Do you think it's different, the percent of people that choose to lie in these cases? Or maybe I should ask about what percent are willing to tell the truth? Yeah, give me the percent that's willing to tell the truth. Okay, so Peter, your hypothesis is that in both cases, whether or not it benefits you $1 to lie or $10, in both cases, about half the people will choose to lie and half will tell the truth. Does anybody, so now let's talk about the comparison. So Peter, will you still stick with this, that there's no difference between those two treatments or not? Either you're a liar or not. Ooh, great hypothesis. Great hypothesis. So this is testable. In fact, it was tested by Yuri Gnesi, an economist who I respect, but I still feel a little, never mind. Anybody else have a different hypothesis? That people are more likely to lie in one case than they are in the other? Come on, someone else guess. If you're wrong, who cares? If you're wrong, it will be permanently shared on YouTube. If Yuri is watching this, I'm sorry I said that about you. You were fair in your assessment of my work as an economist. Anybody else? Come on, Peter's the only one willing to guess. The question is, is there going to be a difference between the case? I'll write out the question. Question. Are people more likely to lie when it benefits them $10? I can't write $10. $10 than when it benefits them only $1? Are people more likely to lie when it benefits them $10 than when it benefits them only $1? Peter says no. Anybody say yes? 50-50 chance of being right here. Ibrahim says yes. Thank you. At least one other person answered. Okay. But wait a second, Ibrahim. I think you contradicted yourself. You said, I think people are self-interested. Doesn't that mean they would always lie? In which case there should be no difference in the likelihood of lying. If you say yes to my question, the question that I put in the chat, if you think yes, that means you think there's certain people who will lie if the benefit is high enough, but they won't lie if the benefit is small. That's a different hypothesis than saying, I think people are self-interested and they're always just going to lie. Maybe I've gone through these enough. Let's go to the answers. You want to see the answers? I'm myself. I'm curious what the answers are. Okay, let's see. How many lied when there was only $1 of profit versus $1 of loss? The answer was 36%. So most people told the truth in that case. What about when it's $1 profit but $10 loss? This is the case. This is the second case that once again, I'm guilty of talking about loss. I'm talking about the reference point. Here, I'm talking about the reference point being the maximum you could have earned, the 20. Instead, you're only earning 10 instead of 20. I'm thinking that as a $10 loss. Even though I totally agree with a different reference point, it would be, you could think of it as just not a $10 gain. Okay, how many people do you think, you guys, I'm giving you this, 36% lied when they had $1 they could earn and $1 that they were taking away. What about when it's more costly for the other person? More people lie or less people lie? It's more costly to the people to lie. Do you think that they're more likely to lie? I would hope not. It should be less likely. 50%. I don't think you'll understand this, Peter. But by $10 loss, I mean you're hurting the other person more when you do this. And we're running out of time. So it should be less. Here, I'll just give you the answer. It's 17%. 17% of the time, okay, this answer is for the previous one. So actually, you remember the second question I gave Ibrahim, like, what if it was 11 and 20? He was in the minority. Only 17% of the people were still willing to lie in that case. 83% of the time people told the truth. What about when the benefit here, this was the first one I asked him, $10 profit to yourself, $10 of foregone profits to the other person. That one is about 50-50. So Peter, you nailed that one. You nailed the one which was the first question I asked Ibrahim and Jade. When faced with those incentives, about half the time people tell the truth and the other half the time people lie. But when the benefit to themselves goes down to only $1, a lot more people tell the truth. What does this tell us? This is kind of the point of Gneezy's paper, is that there seems to be a cost of lying for a lot of people. Certainly for whatever the difference between these two numbers is, 35%. There's a group of people, 35%, that will lie in one case but not in the other. How do you explain that? That they will lie in one case but not in the other? It must be that they feel some psychological cost to lying. They would prefer not to. Deception is somehow unpleasant to them. But if the benefits are high enough that they overcompensate, or they compensate for the psychological cost, then they'll do it. And this was kind of the point of Gneezy's paper, that there's a cost of lying. And last point I want to make is that all of these were significantly different than the percentage that shows the profitable outcome without having to lie. Here's what I mean by that. What if instead of Ibrahim having to lie to Jade about whether to get option A or B, what if he could just pick A or B? You know what I'm saying? He doesn't have to lie to Jade. He just says it's going to be option A. The difference is there were statistically different. The differences were statistically significant between the cases where you had to lie to get that outcome and the cases where you could just make that outcome happen. That means that there is a cost of deception. It's something which affects our decision-making abilities, which something a purely self-interested model would not have. Okay? So I think that's all I want to say about deception game, unless you guys have any questions. I think we're out of time. Right? Yeah, we're a little bit over time. So for next class, I will have you watch 4 videos, and they talk about trust. They talk about gift exchange. They talk about the ultimatum game, which is a test of bargaining, how people are willing to bargain with each other, and punishment in public good games. Those 4 videos are going to have a lot to say about how people behave in a way that's different, how pro-social people behave in a way that's different than self-interested people. Okay, guys, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna